My name is Jerry Thomas, and my hometown is San Francisco. Prior to joining the Marine Corps, I naturally was 17 and lived in San Francisco and had quit school and had odd jobs and decided to leave San Francisco on my own. And I got as far as Wichita, Kansas, where I had an uncle. Invited myself to stay with him for a few months and ended up working at his gas station, and knew that that wasn't what I wanted. I knew I couldn't go back to San Francisco. I just didn't want to go back to what I left. So I went down to the post office to join the service. I looked at the posters at the post office, and one of the posters was a Navy ship in rough seas, and I know going fishing in San Francisco Bay I'd get seasick, so that wasn't for me. And I went in, and then the next morning I was on my way to San Diego. Not a problem at all. I don't remember taking a test. I don't remember anything. I just remember the next morning I was on a train to Kansas City, Missouri, and then a plane to San Diego. That's pretty well how I got in the Marine Corps. Went to boot camp in San Diego. Come out of boot camp and went to infantry training at Camp Pendleton, and then on to Okinawa and went to an infantry company. Immediately I realized that the infantry company was not what I wanted. I didn't like it. I wanted to do some other hands-on, and somehow I got elected to be the company commander's driver, and from there I went to the motor transport and changed my MOS, and I got out of it. So my first 4 years in the Marine Corps was actually motor transport. Then came time to re-enlist or get out, and I thought hard about getting out, but I was married by then and had 2 children. In fact, I had 3 children and no big prospect for a job. So I re-enlisted and went into aviation field. I went to Memphis, Tennessee for training, which was terrific. Trained as a helicopter mechanic. In those days, you trained on the whole aircraft. This was in 1960. I joined the Marine Corps in 57, and in 60 I went into aviation. Got out of Memphis and went to Santa Ana, California, LTA, and joined the first squadron I joined was 363. Immediately after joining and getting a little training, I went to 362, and then the Cuban crisis came up and I went to 361 and went to Cuba with HMM 361. Got back from 361 in December of, I guess it was 62, I joined 364 and ended up staying in 364 till September of 66. And after that, I was stationed back at Santa Ana. I went to more training at Corpus Christi, Texas, at the Red Mac overhaul facility for Hueys. I came out of there and was sent to Camp Pendleton with VMO 5. Shortly after arriving at Camp Pendleton, I got orders again to go to Vietnam, and I went over with VMO 2 from 68 and 69. So that put me in Vietnam 63, 64, 65, 66, 68, and 69, part of all those years. Don't get me wrong, I didn't enjoy the war. I wasn't against the war. We were doing what we were trained for, and I felt it was a good cause. But you had bad parts, and then there was good parts. That brings up a funny story, and I'll throw it in here. We were on our second tour, and if you were flying all day, you never had time to go out and wash your clothes or send them what they called the base laundry. They came back as dirty as they went in. But I'd put them over the fence to the Vietnamese, and they'd wash them for you and charge you so many piastres or whatever the money was. And well, the colonel we had for a group didn't think that should go on, and he had his guards go out to the village, and wherever there was laundry hung up, military laundry, he took the laundry, and at those days you always had your name stamped on everything. So our CO called me up there and he wanted to know how Colonel Johnson got my laundry. Everything isn't doom and gloom. I survived the 3 years over there, and minor scrapes, but nothing serious. And it's a shame. While in country, you realized you really felt that you were doing something. If not, I guess you could figure a way to get out, not go to war, but that was what you were trained for, and it's what you did. And the better you did it, the better you felt. To know all the protesting was going on back in the States, it upset you pretty much. Instead of getting the support that you should from the American people, and it wasn't I don't know how to place this, the older generation. It was a young generation, and I guess they felt they had a right to protest, which they did, but it wasn't helping the effort for the war. In fact, it was putting politicians against politicians. It was slowing up money trails. It was slowing up support. It was doing more damage to the country than it did. And eventually what we did is pulled out and left the Vietnamese to themselves. Now we're buying candles and models from them. So I don't know, but it's an experience in itself, and to be in the Marine Corps and to go through it, I was glad I did. I wouldn't have missed it. That was the training. From then on, after Vietnam, I had a successful career and many duty stations, but I still look back at Vietnam and have a lot of mixed emotions of what went on outside the country. I can't say just outside the country. I didn't like what went inside the country with the death and the destruction, but it hurt us a lot to know that people were demonstrating back at home, and riots in LA and stuff like that. I could tell funny stories, but all units have funny stories, and it's how we lived when we went over the second time. There was nothing. I mean, it was the side of a hill, and they say you're going to build your own runway, you're going to build your own tents, you're going to put up tents, you're going to live in them. And we did. And the monsoon season came when we first got there, and we're laying in little pup tents, and now I know what the infantry felt like. And we laid there while the Seabees helped build a runway for us in Keha, and we had been used to living in French barracks in 63 and 64, and now we went back in 65 and 66 and we're living in mud. What changed the war? So those were comical, getting in chow lines and trying to ration at night 2 beers per person, and stumbling down the hill in mud just to go get your 2 beers. Those things you can laugh about. We went through it, and it wasn't just the enlisted, it was the officers too, and hey, how can a war change overnight that bad, and so after the war, I came back in 1969 and went to what they called Naval Missile Center, Point Mugu, which was ideal. 20 Marines and a bunch of Navy people there, and that started another career, and I enjoyed it. The war wasn't over, but I didn't think I'd be going back after my 3rd tour, so I could relax. All this time I had a family, and the family did well, and you sent as much money as you could home, plus they got allotments, and I got flight pay while I was there. And in those days, a couple dollars went a long ways. I don't know how the kids do it nowadays in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the money, it just unbelievable. But I had 5 children, and we stayed together and had a good life. Mail's another thing from country. You're in country and you write a letter, you figure it's going to take 7 to 10 days to get there, so any questions you had, it's going to take 7 days till you get back, so you're talking 23 days or more before you're corresponding. So if you kept that chain going and wrote every 2 or 3 days, when mail call came, you'd hear, Thomas, got a letter, you'd feel good, and you wouldn't get a letter for a week. I mean, you'd start thinking, what went wrong? What's the matter? You know, and or if somebody was sick and you didn't hear how it's coming out. So the mail and that kind of stuff nowadays with internet and everything else, that's so super for the troops to keep up with their family, and the families need it. No, but you know, the mail, if you wanted to send money home and you didn't have an allotment, which you tried to always have a good allotment, but to send money home, you had to go to a post office or somewhere on the, I don't want to call it a base, somewhere where you were in Vietnam, and try to find where you can get a money order. You put that in the mail, and then that took another 10, 15 days to get home. And a lot of times we took mail, we'd fly it out to the troops in the field. And, you know, that was special when you could bring a bag of mail out. They might have been out there 15 days and you bring a bag of mail out to them. That was a morale getter. Hot chow. We used to fly hot chow. I know on the holidays, Thanksgiving or Christmas, if the infantry out on a small outpost, we'd fly hot meals out to them. Or what they called hot meals in containers that, you know, tried to be hot. But that was a big break, and I enjoyed that kind of stuff too. You weren't worried about getting shot up because you were bringing the food out to them, and it was a good mission. You know, there's a lot different. It seemed like every time you went overseas, you came back, something simple, the cars changed, cities got bigger, prices started going up, riots. The biggest thing I noticed was the demonstrations and the young people, and it just got more and more and more. When you were right in your base there at Santa Ana, it wasn't bad because you were either on the base or home, and Santa Ana was fairly military town with El Toro and everything. But if you'd go to LA, or you always had on the news where the protesters were, where the demonstrations were. And, you know, that wasn't what you were used to. That was the bad side. But like I did say, highways change. You were gone for a year, and you come back after a year. It's amazing what you don't notice. Your children, that was a big thing, how your children have grown. Each year you go overseas, and, you know, I just look back and almost want to say how selfish I was by enjoying my time to go do what I was trained to and leaving them at home to care for themselves. You know, as I got older, that became a very sensitive subject for me. But as a 22, 23-year-old trained Marine, that's what I want to do. I want to go overseas and do what I was trained for. And as you get into your 30s and 40s, you start realizing, hey, you know, should I have done what I did? Well, it's too late now. I can't go back and change it. And we survived it, so that was good. And then when you are home, you're training, you're flying, you're going on cross countries, you're going on deployments for 2 or 3 weeks to 29 Palms or to Camp Pendleton. So the same thing goes on, even though you're stateside. In the later portions of the war in 66 through 69 and in the 70s, you were told not to wear your uniform when you got off the plane or go in the airport and change it, because the public wasn't happy with people in uniform and it wasn't the best thing. And I never did change. I kept my uniform and I wore it until I got home, and never had a problem. But I just didn't like the idea of being told you couldn't wear your uniform. But as far as the protesters, to this day, I'm not sure why they were protesting. Yes, we were adding a lot of people. Yes, we were losing a lot of people. But it started out defending a country that needed help. How we get involved in that, I don't know, but that was our job to do. And I would never think wrong of that. I felt very good about what we did over there and what the American forces did. I was very sad when we pulled out and left the South Vietnamese people to defend for themselves, because in no way were they ready. In '64, we trained a squadron of Vietnamese pilots and crew members to both fly and do maintenance on the aircraft. We went back there about 7 months later, and the majority of the aircraft weren't even flyable. And we gave them 24 new planes. So when we pulled out of there in '74, there was no way they were capable of maintaining the war, maintaining South Vietnam. Some of the good points, unfortunately, each camp had its own little club, and each club had its own little beer, even if you only got 2 beers a night, but that was something. So you did have a break, and then you had R&R, which they sent you out of country for a week. It's supposed to be every 6 weeks, but it got up to every 10 weeks or so. But you would get a 5-day break. You'd go to Okinawa or Thailand, Bangkok, somewhere like that. In those days, they weren't letting you come home. You could go to Hawaii, but you couldn't go back to the States. Don't know why, but that was the rule. I've seen a lot of sad stuff in country. A lot of people getting hurt, a lot of Americans getting hurt, a lot of very close friends getting hurt, and many times I went out and picked up American soldiers, American Marines that were shot, and you have to bring them back to the different medical facilities. That was sad. Some of them you knew weren't going to make it. Some of them you tried to give what medical treatment you could. Very seldom would you have a corpsman on the plane with you. A good percentage of the time you'd be on a resupply mission, and a unit would call on the radio saying, hey, we got a wounded person, Marine, whatever, and you'd divert and go down and pick them up and get them home. And very few times did you have a corpsman. So you got pretty capable of patching up wounds and stopping the bleeding and protecting the wound. Like I said, you worked 17 hours a day, so you really didn't have time for a lot of fun, but you still had fun. They were still joking around. They were still not doom and gloom on the troops. Waking up, getting up early, 5:30, 6 o'clock, you didn't have alarm clocks, so you didn't worry about it. You were awake that soon. You'd hear somebody else in the tent or the wooden hardback or wherever you were living making noise. And if you went to chow hall, you'd go grab some chow and head for the flight line. Hopefully you knew that you had an early morning launch, but if you didn't, you ran down there and you checked the flight board to see if Gunny Shane had you on the list or whoever the line chief was, and that started your day. If you weren't on for a flight, you did maintenance on the plane. You did preventive maintenance. You greased it, you oiled it, you checked everything, and you prepared. You were always ready for that flight. You had your ammo all clean. You had the guns clean. You were ready to go. That was your normal day. And then about 5, 6 o'clock at night, certain people would be designated to be standby at night, and the rest of the duty section would be free to go to chow and maybe go up to the club and have a few beers or relax or have a few sodas or just go to your tent and crash. I never was afraid of even you knew you were going into a hot zone. The plane in front of you called fire. We knew we were going to get it. That never bothered me. For some reason, it didn't bother me at all. What worried me, could I do a good job of suppressing their fire so we could either go in and let the troops out of the plane or pick them up? Your fear came after the fact. To me, when you're back up at 1,500 or 2,000 feet flying home, and you start thinking, you know, and you're looking down the inside of the plane if there's any bullet holes, and that's when the fear came in. I did it again. When is it going to be my day? You know, when are we going to get hit? And never did I experience it going in, but it was always coming out after the fact. Here again, it goes back to the training. You weren't trained to think of the situation. You're trained to control the situation and do the best you can of it. If you start trying to plan everything, you let it come as it is and then take your action. I guess what I consider my most successful portion of my life was being able to join the Marine Corps and complete 28 years of successful, complete 28 years with the Marine Corps and enjoying it. Going in as a private, making master sergeant, making second lieutenant, and retiring as a major, and getting an education while I was there and going to completing college and working on a master's degree. To me, those are all, if it wasn't for the Marine Corps, I wouldn't have been able to do that either. So those were, that's a success that I brought on myself with the help of the Marine Corps. And some of it was after life. After the Marine Corps, I went to work for McDonnell Douglas Aircraft Company, and they had a great educational program for my master's, and it was completely paid for.
That's great.
You know, I look back and see what the impact each unit I was in and what the impact on the war would have been, and that's hard to tell. It's we were always told how many tons of cargo we hauled, how much rice, how many troops we hauled. There was always comments on those numbers, and as one squadron would leave country, they would always put out their totals. And if that's how we supported the war, I think the biggest support of the war that I felt great about was the medevac operations. When you went in and got a wounded Marine and got him back to B-Med or out to the Repose or one of the ships, you saved his life, hopefully 90% of the time. And to me, that's what the biggest accomplish. Getting rice and food to villagers, that's good. But taking wounded people out and getting them treated, to me, was the biggest success any squadron has. I guess through the experiences in Vietnam, or I should say, the effect that I've got from Vietnam, you grew up fast. You thought you knew it all until Vietnam, and then you realized you weren't a know-it-all and you weren't a big shot. You were just another person, and you learned to cope with that, and you learned how to live life the way you were supposed to. I don't think people should have to go to war to grow up, but it sure helped me.
Yeah.
That the majority, this time in history, or the time of Vietnam War in history, I just wish people would understand that the majority, and I feel confident when I say the majority of the service people that actually went into country or supported the troops in country believed in what they were doing, believed it was a good cause. It hurt near the end when even the politicians were against it. So how could we support something that our government didn't support, or our politicians, not our government? That bugged me, but I just want the people to know that the majority of the Marines that I knew, or the service people that I didn't know, I still feel 90% of them supported what they were doing in country for the South Vietnamese.